It's fine. All right. It is what it is. Okay. So you have a test coming up a week from today. It's your second test. I need to get your first test back to you. It was not pretty. Okay. I don't say that to discourage you, and just know I want you to do great. So if you want to do great and I want you to do great, then it'll go great. I will be gladly find some way of giving you a second run at that thing. Okay? I haven't decided yet, am I going to let you take that test over again? Am I going to do something at the end of the semester? I don't know. But you need a way to get those grades up. So I'm about it. But I'm going to keep the bar up here, you know, where it's at least. But you're going to have to come up to me, okay? At least, if you remind me at the end of the day, I'll get your test back. Okay, I haven't graded yours yet. Sorry.
It's okay, you don't have to.
Well, I do need to. So I'll show you. You probably already know, right? Because y'all took it, and it was more than you were expecting, I guess. That's okay. But now you know. So the next one's coming. Don't think it's going to be easier. You're going to have to know, for every single organelle, you need to be able to tell me, is it membrane bound? What does it do? What does it look like? What kind of a cell is it? Is it in plants? Is it in animals? Is it fungus? Is it in a bacteria? You got to tell me all that for every single organelle. Its structure, its function, its location, all of it. You got to be able to tell me what it looks like on a picture. If I give you a picture, a diagram, all this stuff, you got to be like, yes. That right there is a centriole. That's a nucleus. That's an endoplasmic reticulum. That's a Golgi apparatus. That's a vesicle. That's a cell membrane. That's cytoskeleton. That's all these things. You must be able to do that. Okay? You got to. You just have to. You also have to be able to tell me all kinds of stuff about membranes. We've talked about membranes and transport a lot. We actually kind of started there, then we dove into cells, then we came back to it. So this is very, very important. And that was the whole last class that many of you were gone for. But the video, I even sent you an email going, hey, watch this video and learn this stuff, right? So you got to be able to tell me about, yes, sir?
I opened it and there was nothing attached to it. And then how am I?
Okay. Everybody had the same result? Okay. Okay, let's check that right now. Okay. Let me make sure that on Moodle it's good. If it is, then we're good. If it's not, then I got to fix it. Okay.
Which are specific to
Yeah, okay. So at least on the Moodle, it's up and it's good. I don't know why it didn't work out in your email. Sorry about that. But you can go to Moodle and you can watch it, okay? You got to be able to tell me about all the different types of transport. You know, first thing, here I am, I didn't want to review and I'm reviewing. It's okay. So we got transport, right? So the movement of things, and you know, we can kind of break it down into passive, active, right? And under passive, you got things like diffusion, you got osmosis, you got facilitated diffusion, right? Over here, you got pumps, carriers, all that kind of stuff, right? You've also got something called bulk transport, which is pinocytosis and phagocytosis, right? And you got to be able to tell me about hypertonic, hypotonic, isotonic. Let me just throw those words up here, right? Real quick. Hyper. That's about done. Hyper. Hypo. Isotonic. Right? Things flow down their concentration gradient. You got to be able to understand the word homeostasis. Right? These are some of the big concepts for cellular transport. You got to know this stuff, and you got to know those organelles. And so there is an online homework quiz that has just what, like 73 questions or something like that. I mean, it's a lot, because it is a lot. Because think about all those organelles, and so like each question is like What is this organelle made of? What does this organelle do? What is this in plants? Is this in animals? Is this in fungus? Is this in bacteria? It just covers it all. So just know that when you go through that and you can get all like 73 or whatever those correct at 100%, you're ready for that portion of the test. And then that just leaves this part, okay? If I get a chance, I'll get you a quiz for this. No promises, okay? But I will try to. Y'all should pray for me that I get the time to, okay? It'd be good. I'd like you to have it. Okay, so this is happening October 3rd, which is midterm time. All right? So that's that. Now, today, we're going to put some of these pieces together. These different things we've been talking. We've been talking about atoms, molecules, and biomolecules, and membranes, and organelles, and all this kind of stuff, right? So, here's this question. What is, which class of biomolecules, this is straight off the last test, right? Which class of biomolecules is just like a ready source of energy? Just, I mean, it takes almost nothing to get the energy out of it.
Lipids?
Lipids aren't bad, but the one that organisms use most frequently.
Carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates. And which carbohydrate have I told you? Like you have to know this carbohydrate.
Glucose?
Glucose. Good. Okay. Glucose is, when we talk about energy in a cell, we're going to use glucose as our model. Okay, let me talk about this. Our concept here is respiration. All right? Respiration. Respiration is the metabolism of biomolecules to produce energy. I'm going to say produce cellular energy. Your body can use all kinds of different biomolecules for energy. There's energy in all of these biomolecules. It takes energy to make them, and you can release energy by doing a form of metabolism that breaks them down. By the way, the metabolic process that breaks things down, right off the old last test, what is that called? Catabolism, right? Good. So you can catabolize all of the four major classes of biomolecules: the lipids, the proteins, the nucleic acids, and the carbohydrates. Some of them you tend to do and use more than others. Okay? But know that when I talk about respiration, I don't just mean glucose. Okay? Respiration is just this process. We are going to focus on glucose. Okay? But any of these other biomolecules can be converted and used in the processes that we're going to talk about. Okay? But as a model, our model today is going to be, and really forevermore, is going to be glucose. Okay? Glucose is a 6-carbon sugar, right? It's C6H12O6. Also, right off the last test, they all have this. There's a molecule up there. And it's like, hey, what is this? And if you knew it was glucose, then you knew. But if you didn't know it was glucose, you still could have looked and it gave you the carbons and the hydrogens and the oxygens, and you could have just counted and gone, oh, that's 6 carbons. That's 6 oxygens. That's 12 hydrogens. That's got to be a sugar. Another part on that question, or on that test, was it ends in ose, right? Sugars end in ose. If you put glucose, I gave you some credit, but I didn't give you the whole credit, right? I mean, yes, glucose ends in ose. Nose ends in ose. So it's not just like pick a word that has these 3 letters in it, but it was the idea of a sugar. But at least glucose was a sugar, so I gave you some credit. Model glucose equals C6H12O6. So what we're going to begin talking about today as we talk about respiration, we're going to use glucose as a model to show how glucose is catabolized. It's broken down to release energy. Okay? And we're going to talk about some metabolic pathways. Okay? All right, y'all ready? So when we talk about glucose, the first step in breaking glucose down is called glycolysis. This is another, like, hey, we've been talking about these terms. When you see glyco, what does that tell you? I wish I could draw. Glyco, what does it look like? What does it sound like? Yeah, it looks like glucose. It looks like this idea of a sugar, right? And lysis? Split. To split. So this is glucose splitting. I'm telling you, scientists, super creative. What does it do? Okay, let's name it that. So glucose splitting. Our first step is glycolysis. Then we have to ask ourselves a question. Is O2 present? Is O2 present? If yes, go over here. If no, go over here. Let's follow the yes first, okay? If yes, then we're going to go into what's called the Krebs cycle. If no, then we're going to go into fermentation. I'm going to write above this anaerobic fermentation. When you guys have questions like, hey, what does that word mean? You ought to ask it. You all know what anaerobic means?
Isn't that like me without oxygen?
Without oxygen. An means without. Aerobic refers to oxygen. Two types of anaerobic respiration. There's alcohol fermentation. And there's lactic acid fermentation. This is the one that you do. This is the one that yeast do. Quite literally where we get alcohol from. Kind that people drink. So if there's glucose, we start with glucose. We'll go through glycolysis. Our glucose, which is a 6-carbon molecule, right? Glucose is a 6-carbon molecule. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. These are carbons. It gets split into 2 3-carbon molecules. Okay? Don't worry about the names of these yet. You're going to know them soon. Then these 3-carbon molecules, if oxygen is present, they'll go to the Krebs cycle. If there's not oxygen present, they'll go to fermentation or anaerobic respiration. We're done on this side of the equation for now. We're going to come over here. So the Krebs cycle. From the Krebs cycle, they'll go through what's called a link. And from the link, ultimately, it'll go to what's called the electron transport chain, the ETC. Okay? I'm going to write that down. It's electron transport chain. Got another question for you. It goes back to the last test again. Where in this is the energy? Because I told you what we're doing in respiration is the metabolism of biomolecules to produce cellular energy. Where is the energy in this? It's in the bonds. So when I break this, I'm releasing energy, right? This phase, I release 2 ATP. Why do I draw ATP like this? Because everyone draws ATP like this. So I do it too. You know what happens over here with ATP? You know how many more ATP you get out of this? None. Get no more ATP out of this side of the equation. Over here, you do. Okay. Next step, let's do a cell. And in this cell is, I'll give you a nucleus so you know we're in an animal cell or a plant cell or whatever. Let's do a big old mitochondria. What is a mitochondria? What do they do? Powerhouse the cell. You learned that word and you had no idea what it meant. It means they... You know what happens in the mitochondria? You ready? This stuff does. Okay? The mitochondria is a double membrane system. It's got membrane inside of membrane. It's crazy. It's got membrane inside of membrane. So, one of the things that's interesting is that glycolysis happens out here. My link happens out here. The Krebs cycle happens in here. And the ETC happens on here, like on the membrane. It's taking advantage of concentration gradients and diffusion and all that kind of stuff. There are lots of ETCs all over this membrane. So I'm just like, probably making it ineligible for you, or illegible for you. But you need to know this. You need to know where these steps happen. Glycolysis happens out here. The link step happens out here. Krebs happens in here. The electron transport chain happens on the inner membrane. Let me give this to you another way. Glycolysis link, Krebs, ETC, and I'm going to throw in fermentation, okay? Where in the cell does glycolysis occur?
Outside.
It's in the cell.
Well, I mean, like,
Yeah, what's this outside called? You're going to have to know this. You got to test in a week. Cytoplasm. Okay? Glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm. Where does the link step happen? In the cytoplasm. Where does the Krebs cycle occur?
Mitochondria.
It's in the matrix of the mitochondria. Mitochondrial matrix. Where does the ETC occur?
And then the
On the inner membrane of the mitochondrial inner membrane. And where does fermentation happen? I didn't draw it yet. Where do you think it's going to happen?
Nucleus?
Not the nucleus.
Cytoplasm.
The cytoplasm. What process is this? This is a big overview of what process. Big word.
Breaking down.
Starts with an R. That's what it does, but what's the name? Huh?
Is there respiration?
Respiration. And what is respiration, Jacob?
Breaking down glucose.
In this case, glucose is our model, breaking down of biomolecules to release cellular energy. Good. Okay. Our model is glucose. Glucose has how many sugars? How many carbons?
12. Oh, 6.
6. So what's for glucose? C6H12O6. C6H12O6. Like, you just got to know that. That's got to be ingrained in here. C6H12O6. The first step of respiration in a cell is what? Glycolysis. What does that name mean?
Glucose splitting.
Splitting the glucose. How many parts do I split it into? Say 2. 2. If it's a 6-carbon molecule to begin with, how much is each smaller molecule?
3.
3. Good. Now, where does it go next?
2 different cycles.
2 different cycles. It depends, right? It depends on what?
if there's oxygen.
There's oxygen. If there's not oxygen, where does it go? Anaerobic respiration, fermentation, right? And whether it's alcoholic fermentation or lactic acid fermentation depends on who and what you are, what cellular machinery you have, what biomolecules you have. By the way, that's determined by what DNA you have. You have different genes than a bacteria, right? You have genes that do lactic acid fermentation. Fermentation? You do. You ever lifted weights? Or really just trained crazy hard and then your muscles ache? It's because of lactic acid buildup, because you couldn't get enough oxygen. You know, they have breathing coaches now in sports, right? To teach you to breathe better, because if you can get more oxygen into your cells, then you can keep your cells going this step instead of this step, and you know what? This yields a lot more energy. I only get 2 ATP if I run over here, but if I go over here, I'm getting crazy ATP comparatively. We'll talk about that in a minute. This is your friend. This, you get by, but it's rough. Okay. You see how the parts are all coming in? Literally which one of these you do depends on which proteins you have, which depends on which DNA you have. It's okay. So we go glucose to glycolysis If we have oxygen, we go that way. If we don't, we go this way, whether it's this or this, depends on your DNA. Let's go this way. If I have oxygen, then I can go into the Krebs cycle, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's this link step, and there's this electron transport chain, and these right now are just like names, right? Except at least they're attached somewhat to a cellular structure. Everything in biology is about charge and shape, right? The shape, the form, and another concept that you've probably heard me say is form fits function. And that's related to charge and shape also, right? Because shape and form, that's the same word, form fits function. So the form of the mitochondria fits its function. It's utilizing this double membrane. I know you haven't seen the details yet, but it utilizes double membrane and concentration gradients and diffusion to do this electron transport chain thing, which is where you get the bulk of your ATP in aerobic respiration. The Krebs happens in the mitochondrial matrix. Electron transport chain happens on the inner membrane. Everything else is happening out here, which means stuff has to move from out here to in here. What's that called when stuff moves through parts of a cell? Transport. Yeah. Okay. Good. Of course, these are your things. All right. Now, I got a question for you. What organisms do you know of cannot do aerobic respiration, and why? And I haven't told you this, so you're going to have to use your brains. The answer is on the board. You can put the pieces together to tell me who cannot do aerobic respiration, and you should be able to see why. Bacteria cannot. Why? Because they don't have mitochondria, and all this happens in the mitochondria. So bacteria cannot do this. They can only do fat. Energy yield over here is very poor. Right? The energy yield over here is really, really good. We'll look at how good in a minute. What questions do you have at this stage?
So the anaerobic side only has 2 ATP?
Yeah. You get no ATP out of this, which should leave you with a question if you really get to thinking of why do we do this at all then? They must need to or they wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? Do you do a bunch of stuff you don't need to? No. Neither do they. Neither do you. You would not do lactic acid fermentation if you didn't need to. Why would you produce something that makes you sore? And it's just going to be in the way and you've got to break it down later. That doesn't make sense, right? Unless you need to, and you do need to. What do I get out of glucose? Energy. Can we agree that some energy is better than no energy? Like I should do, if I can't do this, if I can't get oxygen, I should at least do this, right? Even though this is terrible compared to that, I should do this if I have it, right? Yeah? Okay. So there's something about these steps that allow this to continue. Okay? We're going to look at that in a minute. All right. I'm going to show you a series of videos, and we're going to talk about it. And, excuse me. And we'll draw things, and we'll take notes, and we'll do all that kind of stuff. All the videos are up on the Moodle already, and then today's lecture will be there as well. So let's get started. Let me change the split screen. All right. Let's see here.
One of the most important things that our cells do is cellular respiration. During respiration, our cells break down the food that we eat in order to make the energy that cells can use. This form of energy is a special molecule called ATP. Every living thing uses ATP as energy, so it is incredibly important. Without it, life as we know it would not exist. But how do we make ATP? In this video series, we will focus on the breakdown of sugar, particularly glucose, during the process of aerobic respiration, which uses oxygen. During aerobic respiration, glucose from our food and oxygen from the air we breathe are used to make ATP. This process also makes the carbon dioxide that we breathe out and water as waste products. Check out the equation. But before we get into the sweet details of how our cells get this done, let's do a quick, explosive demonstration to show the energy contained in it.
Okay. Reminded me of something. We do need an equation. You must know this. Oh, it hurts my heart to erase this. Okay. So, for aerobic respiration, begin with what molecule as our model? Glucose. What's the formula? C6H12O6. And he just said you must oxygen. And when you do, you produce what two things?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide and
Water.
water. So if you were in my chemistry class, right now we'd be balancing these equations. How many carbons do I have over here? 6. The only carbon source I have over here is CO2, so how many do I have to have? 6. Gotta have 6 CO2. How many hydrogens do I have? 12. How many do I have over here? 2. So how many of these do I need? That'd be 20. I need 12. 6. Well, that leaves me 6 oxygens here, right? And that leaves me 12 oxygens here, so that's 18 oxygens. Is that right? 12 plus 6, 18. Ah, okay. And how many do I have? So I have 18 oxygens over here. How many do I have over here? Right here? 6. 18 minus 6 is 12, right? So how many of these do I need? Say 6. 6. It is a nice thing, just how consistent it is with these 6s. I got 6s everywhere, man. C6H12O6 plus 6O2 yields 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O. You see it? You got to know that. You absolutely know that. At an atomic level, this is what's happening in respiration. Obviously, there's lots of steps in between, but you do need to know that. And we do all this so that we can release energy in the form of, say it now, ATP. Now, we did this last class if you were here, or if you watched the video on Moodle, which I understand you probably did not because the link wasn't working. But what is ATP? Huh? It is, but I want to look at what it is at the molecular level, okay? So adenosine triphosphate. Tell me what tri means. 3. 3 what? Phosphates. Good. And then adenosine. You don't necessarily know what that is yet, okay? Adenosine, it's going to come into play, picture here for you, okay? So it has this. This is the sugar ribose. Where have you heard that word before? Ribonucleic acids. It's ribose attached to what's called a nitrogenous base. Remember in DNA, in RNA, we talked about phosphate, sugar, nitrogen base, phosphate, sugar, nitrogen base. This is like part of, so here I've got phosphates, and I've got sugars, and I've got nitrogen base, like literally we could swap out part of RNA and make energy out of that. It's crazy. That's how your body works. That's how God's made you to be. So here, this thing is connected to one of the nitrogen bases, which is called adenosine. So right now, this is a sugar and a nitrogen base.